Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's talk a little bit about this book right here, and this book series and why they haven't really been adapted into movies. Now, if you've been watching the channel, you know that I reviewed a Dark Tower movie last week, but I told you that it had virtually nothing to do with the book series, and I was correct in that. It had some of the characters from the series, sort of, representations of the characters from the series, but it, story-wise, just completely departed from the series. It left it completely behind. They kind of hinted it might have been a sequel, but I don't know. It had nothing to do with the book. So why didn't they make these books? There's a lot of fans of the Dark Tower, of Stephen King's Dark Tower. In fact, I think most of the reviews that I've seen, negative reviews, have been about how far they departed from the source material, that it really had nothing to do with the books, and that was upsetting. And that's going to be upsetting if you're a fan of the books. So it seems like, hey, why didn't they just make this if it already has a built-in fan base? Well, the first answer would be, somebody has said to me, like, old customers are worthless and new customers are the only valuable ones. You know the people who already like this are going to go see the movie, and you want to get a few new people along for the ride. But I actually think it's more than that. I think it has a lot to do with what's actually in the book. Now, The Gunslinger is the first book in the series, and it's the most unique, and it's actually my favorite book in the series and probably one of my favorite narrative books of all time, although most people probably wouldn't share that sentiment with me. And that's because it's so non-typical for a piece of literature. It has an odd narrative structure. It has some really cool language that I like. It has some great imagery. And it certainly made me feel sets of emotions that I'm not used to feeling within the context of standard fiction narrative. And for that, I really, really appreciate it. I also think it would have made a really cool movie. I would have really liked to watch the movie. It'd be like a really twisted Western. This takes place basically out in the desert and kind of like a Western style movie. And you have the three main characters from the movie in it. You got Jake, the Man in Black, Walter Dim, and Roland of Gilead, the Gunslinger. But the story is pretty profoundly different, and the way the characters act is very, very different. And I think that because of the way that the story is told in this book, that would be kind of off-putting for a lot of people just in terms of style. I might liken it, if I were imagining this, it'd be like the Western or desert version of, say, Valhalla Rising, if you've ever seen Valhalla Rising. I think Valhalla Rising is a really cool movie. Very interesting, very different from what normal people are used to watching in the cinema. Very quiet, full of things that aren't directly explained, that you have to just kind of sit there and ponder and figure out as you're watching it. And I would imagine that this movie would end up being kind of like that. But you also have some things with the characters and with the story. Things are told kind of out of order. You could fix that in the movie. But the characters do things, particularly Roland does things that would actually off-put an audience, I think, in a movie situation. You want your first movie in a series of movies to really grab people and satisfy them, and this has an ending that would probably not satisfy most people. Roland in this book is really an anti-hero, and he's an anti-hero sort of in the true sense. He doesn't do the things that you would expect a hero to do. And there's going to be some spoilers that follow this, so if you've never read this book and would like to give it a chance, you can just turn this video off. I recommend it, at least for the experience. You'll get to the end of it and be like, I didn't like it, but at least it was interesting. And sometimes that's all you can hope for. But anyway, Roland, there's a part in the story where he kills every person in a town after Walter O'Dim raises this man from the dead and gives him the key to telling about the afterlife. And he basically reveals that the afterlife is something horrific and bad, and that infests the mind of a couple people in the town. They turn on him because of like religious zealotry, and he kills all of them, which is a bit of an anti-hero act, very like Elric-like to me. Because Elric has actually done that in several of Moorcock's stories, like gone buck nasty and like wiped out a whole group of people. I'm thinking of like Fortress of the Pearl. He does that at the end of that. And that's kind of that might be kind of off-putting in a movie. And it would also be extremely violent. And people really like PG-13 movies. People like to put out those PG-13 movies. You don't want the kids to have to beg their mom to go to the Gunslinger. You want them to be able to just buy the ticket and walk right in. And that would have made it a hard R. There's sex in it. And also, basically, at the end of the book, this is a big spoiler, Roland lets Jake die on purpose. So like Jake is falling down in a hole and he's like hanging on for dear life, and he's like, Roland, help me. And Roland like jumps over him to catch the man in black and leaves Jake to die. And Jake is like, go then, there are other worlds than these. And that would have been a really powerful cinema moment, because it really would have like made people sick and like kind of hate the character Roland for not finding like a more noble solution. But it was important in the context of the series, because we have to like really display Roland's, unceasing desire to fulfill his quest, even at the expense of people he loves, which then is something that kind of repeats itself towards the end of the series, and makes him confront that reality once again, in a really, really hard way. And then the book ends with Walter O'Dim and Roland just talking and having like a tarot reading. That's the end of the book. And so because the book ends that way, it would have made a really, really odd movie. It would have made a movie that I would have thought was pretty cool and artsy, but it would have made a movie that I think would have not made fans of would have made people who are not fans of Stephen King's work really upset. And I think it would have I just don't think there's any way a Hollywood executive would approve a story that ended in that sort of way and ended with those sorts of lows and had the protagonist doing essentially a very like wicked and dark things, and you don't want to leave audiences feeling bad and like they watched someone that they don't like on screen. And that's how I think this kind of would have come across. However, I think the imagery would have been great, and this version of the book of course has some like great pictures by Michael Whalen of Roland doing all sorts of cool things. Here he is like fighting mutants, trying to save Jake from mutants, which was cool. This one's a really cool painting. Let me show this one to you. Notice in these that Roland's white. He takes drugs to commune with the spirit. He takes mescaline to commune with the spirit, which is would have been an interesting point in there. There's a part where they're like watching dead men hang. There's a lot of cool story in here, but it would have probably made a movie that most people wouldn't have liked, and that's why I think they didn't make it. Why we got a really bad adaptation of Dark Tower. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean it couldn't have been a TV series. We've seen that you can make TV series out of very long, very sort of gardeny kind of stories like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones has proven that the public is willing to consume long, odd stories, sort of with vigor, and some cases with anti-heroes or very reprehensible characters like in House of Cards. So I think if they'd done it as a TV series from the get-go, it actually would have been probably pretty successful, and the end of this first arc would have really like kicked people in the guts, and really like drew people onward to see what happened next. So that's all I have to say about that. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All my book links and stuff are down below. I appreciate it if you buy a book or download one and take a look at it. And if you do, give me a review. That really, really helps me out on Amazon. And I'll see you guys next time.